All eyes on the Lone Star State. The Senate seat is up for grabs as a veteran incumbent faces his toughest primary yet. Redrawn maps are shaking up Congress, while a wide-open race for Attorney General transforms the power structure in Austin. The polls, the players, the path to victory. This is Battleground Texas.
And welcome in. I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas. Let's get to the headlines, the stories that are making headlines today. Governor Greg Abbott, he faced a weekend of political blowback after doubling down on his endorsement of Nate Sheets over incumbent Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller. Miller fired back in an interview Sunday, calling the move, quote, unsurprising and framing the governor as out of touch with the party's grassroots. Now, in the race for Houston's redrawn 18th Congressional District, Democrat Amanda Edwards has officially suspended her campaign. Edwards was previously set to challenge newly sworn-in Congressman Christian Menifee and longtime Congressman Al Green, who moved into the 18th after the mid-decade redistricting. And there's some new Senate polling out. The new survey from the Hobby School at the University of Houston shows Attorney General Ken Paxton ahead of incumbent John Cornyn in the GOP primary. The poll puts Paxton at 38%, Cornyn at 31%, and Congressman Wesley Hunt back at 17%. Now, for the Democrats, 47% say that they are intending on voting for Dallas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. 39% say that they will vote for Round Rock State Representative James Tallarico. 12% remain undecided. For more to discuss on this, I want to bring in my roundtable, Mark Jones from Rice University and Patrick Svitek, former Washington Post and Texas Tribune political reporters. Mark, you know these numbers like anyone. What do you make of this poll now a week out from early voting?
Well, I think what we're seeing on the Republican side is pretty much a status quo, and that Paxton is ahead of Cornyn by a decent margin. Cornyn's and ahead of Wesley Hunt by a more substantial margin, but no one's going to hit 50% plus one of the vote on March 3rd. So we're looking at a May runoff, most likely between Paxton and Cornyn. Now, what's interesting is Republican primary voters have somewhat a negative opinion of both Cornyn and Paxton. A third have a negative opinion of Cornyn, and 1/4 have a negative opinion of Paxton.
Patrick, you know, you are in D.C., but you have followed Texas politics for some time now and continue to follow it. What do you make of the polling as we get to when people are actually about to start making their voices heard at the polls?
One thing that really stood out to me about the polling was how close all the hypothetical general election matchups are. And that is very relevant because in both these primaries, you have candidates arguing that they're more electable than their opponents. You know, John Cornyn is arguing he'd be a stronger Republican nominee than Ken Paxton. You have supporters of James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett making each of their cases for why they'd be more electable. But this poll, it's one poll, obviously, we have to see if the trend holds. This poll suggests that this is going to be a competitive general election, you know, no matter which, arrangement of nominees we could have. And so that really stood out to me because it could rob some of these primary candidates of the electability arguments that they've been making.
Mark, you know, Ken Paxton actually tweeted the poll this morning saying that, hey, look at the head-to-head, you know, if I were to face John Cornyn in a runoff. Now, we know definitely on the Republican side this is going to a runoff. What are you seeing as far as, I mean, are things still stagnant in your opinion, or are you seeing any inroads by any particular candidate?
Well, I think if we stay with the status quo, it looks good for Ken Paxton in the May runoff. Turnout then tends to be lower, and the people who turn out to vote tend to be more conservative and more likely to be Paxton supporters. I think one thing that's looming over this entire process, though, is the potential for a Donald Trump endorsement. What we found in the survey is that 55% of Republican primary voters say they would be more likely to vote for a candidate endorsed by Trump, compared to only 9% who say they would be less likely. So if Trump were to endorse in this race, it would have an earth-shattering impact.
Patrick, on the Democrat side, you know, Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico now really kind of going head-to-head, trying to get those voters. Could, on the Democrat side, this come down to Hispanic voters?
Yeah, it definitely could. I mean, you've seen Tallarico and later on Crockett make a real effort to reach out to Hispanic voters in Texas, whether it's the specific messaging you've seen from them about issues like ICE and the deportations that are happening under the Trump administration, or whether it's just where they're campaigning in different parts of the state where there's predominantly Hispanic populations. And so I think that's going to be a very critical voting bloc in this primary.
For the first time since the 70s, Democrats say that they have someone running in every state and federal office open in Texas. I sat down this morning with the head of the Texas Democratic Party to talk about turnout.
What I think we have to do in order to reclaim this state is reclaim our territory as the party that is unapologetically on the side of the working class. Democrats built Texas, and I think Democrats have an opportunity to save it.
Do you think the top of the ticket in this race in November could impact Democrat turnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top of the ticket is the one that people look at the most, right? It's a lot sexier than some of your down ballot races. So certainly who you have at the top matters. It will certainly motivate some, whether it's on your side or on the other side. And, you know, there's some political calculations of figuring out how you get to the finish line in November, regardless of who we nominate at the top. Our message is going to stay the same because it's true to who we are as a party. And it is a party that unapologetically stands on the side of people who have to take showers when they get home from work and that are just trying to make sure their kids get the same opportunities they did.
Democrats lost with Hispanic voters in a way that shifted some of these races. How do you get Hispanic voters back?
Well, you don't have to just take my word for it. You can look at Senate District 9, that just last week we overperformed in 31 points. And we saw that in predominantly Hispanic and Latino precincts, that was where the largest overperformance was. I think that Hispanic and Latino voters, in addition to a lot of other types of voters, gave Donald Trump a chance, said, you think you can make things better? Show me what you got. And he did. And for the last year, they realized they've been lied to. They were deceived. That life has just gotten more expensive. They don't feel like anyone is sitting at the table looking out for them.
Do you think immigration enforcement will be a big issue that causes some frustration against Republicans in November?
For years, Republicans have decried big government, and they've pointed fingers at us saying Democrats are the big government party because we want to make sure people have access to health care and your kids get a good education. We want to know what the biggest government is. The biggest government is one that has the right to shoot you point blank in the head for not complying with their orders, or lay you on the ground and unload their clip into your back, or arrest journalists, or kidnap your kids. So I think Republicans are overplaying their hands. Texans are fiercely independent, and we don't like a government coming in and operating that way.
We have much more to discuss. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Well, on Super Bowl Sunday, we also saw some new political ads hit digital and air. Take a listen.
America was built on faith, strengthened by family and protected by freedom. These are the values that made this nation strong. Now those values are under attack. Criminals and invaders push our borders.
The system is broken. Our communities are being terrorized. People are hurting. But Texas has a warrior who's fighting back. A champion for us, our votes, our rights. It drives the president crazy.
All right, Mark and Patrick are back from our roundtable. Patrick, you first. You know, last Thursday I talked to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, and some people were asking, where is she? Because James Tallarico was just blanketing the airwaves with ads. He had an ad air in the Houston market for the Super Bowl. I'm told Crockett will start having ads air on TV. Do you think this could be too late for her in the game, putting ads on the air?
You know, we'll have to see, but I'm not necessarily surprised. I mean, her campaign has released its own polling that shows her in the lead. There's been, you know, some public polling that shows her in the lead. Almost, you know, all the polling shows that she is better known than James Tallarico in this primary. And so it doesn't surprise me that Tallarico, as the lesser known candidate who is trailing in most the polling that I've seen, or not, you know, not having a decisive lead, doesn't surprise me that he would be the first one to start spending real money. He's also has had more time to raise that money to spend it because he's been in the race longer than her. But, you know, there is polling, obviously, that shows that this is a, you know, a generally competitive race. And so it is probably important for her to start spending some money soon to try to, you know, compete with Tallarico.
Mark, to Patrick's point, Jasmine Crockett has the name recognition. If you go off of this poll that was released today, she has a decent lead. But does it seem like her campaign is leaning too heavy into the name recognition?
Well, I think if you could critique the Crockett campaign, it was after her initial launch in December. She really didn't sort of double down and work really hard. It sort of like seemed to coast through the month of December and January. Now, as Patrick mentioned, that's in part because she got into the race so late and didn't have an established infrastructure. But I think she did let Tallarico effectively catch up to her from where he had previously been, and that has made it a much more competitive race. There is always, though, the question about how effective television can be in a Democratic primary. We have about 31 million Texans who see these ads. Only about 1 million will actually vote in the Democratic primary. So while it can have an effect, it often isn't the most efficient use of economic resources.
Yeah, and I'll just add, too, to Mark's point, I mean, the Texas primary is so early March, that if you get in on the last day and, you know, you're not really revving up your campaign until after the holidays, after Christmas and New Year's, that's a third of the primary race right there. And so it's, you know, it's critical for primary candidates to understand just how compressed the Texas primary is, obviously, if you get in at the last minute.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's all about strategy, right? It depends on what's your strategy. And for these candidates, for Jasmine Crockett, she has the name ID, but you can't rest on your laurels. And then for James Tallarico, if you got the money, why not spend it, right, Mark?
Right. No, and Tallarico, like I mentioned, did an outstanding job of just, when Crockett got into the race, he could have effectively given up because he was thinking he was going to compete against Colin Allred, and then he got essentially found himself competing against Jasmine Crockett. But he kept working very hard throughout the month of December and January, raising money, having events, and spending money, and he's put himself in a very good position. Crockett's advantage, though, is that she has overwhelming support in the African-American community, and just shy of 1 out of every 4 voters in the Democratic primary will be African-American, meaning that Tallarico has to win the other demographics by a decent margin, and he's close, but I think the real focal point will be on Latinos and white women, with white women being, of course, the largest demographic in the Democratic primary, representing about 1 out of every 4 voters.
Patrick, about 30 seconds. Do you think, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, if Crockett wins, do you think some frustrated Tallarico supporters may not show up in November?
I think Tallarico supporters will, by and large, unite around Jasmine Crockett if she's the nominee. I think that the opportunity for Democrats in this environment and in Texas this cycle, is too promising for them to do anything like, protest her candidacy in an organized way. I mean, I can't speak for obviously every Tallarico supporter, and I think Tallarico has done a good job of keeping the temperature low so that if he does lose, there's not so much animosity that some of his supporters may not migrate to Crockett.
All right, when we come back, we're talking Bad Bunny, Super Bowl, and political messages. All right, it was Super Bowl Sunday yesterday. You can't have the Super Bowl without a little politics. And the ads, some of them caught the attention of some of the Senate candidates. Take a look at one of the ads that Attorney General Ken Paxton reposted.
They're friends and neighbors, sons, fathers. They're Little League coaches and veterans. They're people who love this country. These are Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. They are removing violent criminals from our streets and neighborhoods.
Now, After previously limiting his U.S. shows due to concerns about ICE enforcement, Bad Bunny took main stage in front of millions on Sunday for the halftime show and making multiple political statements. One of those statements was displayed on the scoreboard, and State Representative James Tallarico reposted it. It said, quote, "The only thing more powerful than hate is love." Bringing back our panel, Mark Jones from Rice University, Patrick Svitek, former Texas Tribune political reporter and former Washington Post reporter. Mark, like I said, you can't. Politics is in everything, right? What do you think of, some people not watching the halftime show, and does that speak to a larger point of just where our politics is right now?
Well, I think it points to a country that's increasingly polarized, where Republicans view things through one lens, Democrats through another. Although I think if we looked at the numbers, I think far more people watched the actual Super 4 live performance than the Turning Point USA halftime show. But I think everything's looked at through a lens. So Republicans, when they saw Bad Bunny's performance, viewed it through one lens in a more negative way. Democrats viewed it through a more positive lens in another way. And then when we see Ken Paxton getting involved, the audience he's pointing at are those Republican primary voters whose support he needs in March and then later in May. And that's a group that is overwhelmingly in support of ICE. And so that goes right along with his broader narrative for the GOP primary campaign and his goal of consolidating support as the most conservative candidate.
Patrick, I don't know if you did a social media cleanse during the Super Bowl, but if you looked during halftime, it got real political. Are the candidates on both sides, are they just preaching to the choir, or are their comments reaching people who are undecided, in your opinion?
I don't know what the effect of their comments is necessarily, but I think it just shows how politics is culture these days. And you're going to see just increasing efforts in the midterms and the next presidential race by both parties to fuse themselves with whatever is, kind of coursing through popular culture at the moment. I mean, I think Donald Trump did a good job of this in his most recent presidential election when you looked at how he kind of beat the Democrats to getting on certain new media platforms, whether it was podcasts or streamers, and really ingratiate himself with some of those up and coming, forms and figures in pop culture. And so, the outcry we've seen over the Super Bowl, the halftime performance, I think it's just a continuation of that. And I think we're going to see more and more efforts by both parties to just connect themselves with pop culture and integrate with pop culture and seize on the strong feelings that come with that.
Mark, you'll have the last word, about 30 seconds. To Patrick's point, Democrats have taken a page out of the Republican playbook because now they are talking way more to podcasters and influencers. Good strategy for them?
Yeah, it's a very good strategy, although it can only help you so far in the sense that that's a great strategy to reach Gen Z and millennials, but among, say, baby boomers and many Gen Xers, that's less effective a strategy. But certainly for Democrats in particular, who know that the more young people they get to turn out to vote, Gen Z in particular, but also younger millennials, the better they'll do in November. You're going to see them, I think, concentrating there, both in this primary, but especially in the November general.
Mark, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be right back. All right, I'm back for the last break. I don't have my Fox Texas Trio colleagues to join me for this block, but hopefully we'll all be back tomorrow. You know, early voting starts on February 17th. That's next week, if I'm correct on that. And so all of these political ads, all of the infighting, we'll see, will it really matter? Now, I'm going to talk about Dallas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett because James Talarico is really getting his name out there. I know our panel talked about the fact that he had to get more name ID than her. That is true. But a lot of circles have been starting to say, where is she? Now, I talked to Crockett last week, and she said she is focused on the ground game. Now we're seeing this digital ad. Now we're going to see an ad on TV. So I'm wondering, is it too little too late? We'll have to wait and see. All right, that's all the time we have. To see this episode or any of our past ones, go to our station's YouTube channels and keep the conversation going by interacting with us on social media. The Fox Texas Trio will be back in full. Greg, Rudy, and me. And we're going to talk to more power players ahead of this March 3rd primary. We'll see you tomorrow.